There it is. Welcome, everybody, to episode 2, episode 32. That's not going to stay shut. Of It's Jacob's tail. It's your tail, bro. Finding things within and without. I'm going to start today what should be a multi part series. Um, and we'll get to that as soon as I get everything squared up here in a second. I'm frizzy, aren't I? We've only got approximately an hour today, maybe an hour and a half. I have some miles I have to log, taking cousin Kieran home. So we're going to do that here shortly. But we needed to get together. We needed to say hello. I think we needed to say hello. There's nobody in the chat, but maybe I just needed to say hello because I said I would. So we're gonna sit down and have a little chat and think about some things that were put in my head. Let's see. Do I need light? I found a little light, and that's kind of Vincent Price, though, isn't it? Sort of one angle lighting. What happens if we? What if we put it over here? Still, it's all going to be angular. Jacob's like, what? No, wait a minute. Is that? It still doesn't really do anything, and it's really annoying. I mean, that much can be said. It's definitely annoying. All right, what if? See, and there's nowhere else. I don't know. That is kind of a spooky look, and we are going to talk about giants. But I don't think that's going to work satisfactorily for what its intention was. But we'll leave it for the moment. Why not? All right. So, intention of episode 32 for those of you on watch back. Well, Jacob, stop. I got a new chair, and of course, dumbass has to put his mouth on it. Hey, hey, don't chew the handle, and don't chew the pom pom from high school. It's like the only thing I have from when I was in high school. All right, move. That side. That side. That side. He's like, no way, dude. Over here's the munchie handle. Don't make me put you out of the corner. Yeah, he's excited. So, what is the purpose of episode 32? Well, I put giants, and we're going to talk about giants. I'm going to give a little credit due to Thoth the Atlantean on X. Let's see, what if we do this? Is that better? Now it's crossed. Now it's better. Thoth the Atlantean on X, he watched some of the stuff I had done with Dave's Multiverse, and we'll get into that in a minute. And he mentioned that we touched on giants. And indeed, this past weekend, I did have some conversations, moving my mic stand, where we touched on giants or tall, larger than your average bear human beings, right? Okay. So that's what we're going to get into. We're going to do a little bit of, as Ricardo calls it, thought exercises, thought experiments. So we're just going to say that up front so as not to, you know, let anybody get pissed off. I tried to get my beard cleaned up today because, it's been a minute, and man, it is it's wacky. It's wacky. That's all I can say about it. What's up, Scribed, aka Thoth? So I'm putting part of the blame for this on you, or credit. However, the show ends up is probably what'll decide the use of that word. But I'm putting it on you because you mentioned this morning the work that had happened, and it had already been on my mind. And we're gonna look. I'm going to use this time for research time. You guys can't really fault me. I think I've been pretty clear that part of the genesis, the idea behind this platform of mine, there are many others for more focused shit. But part of the thing here is to sort of let my research process, right, be part of the deal, okay? And when it comes to the way I've typically obtained and learned, and gained the wisdom of everything I have and I've showcased has been over time, lots of time and every day sort of getting out in it and chasing various threads over years, right? And so where I'm kind of going with that is I feel that there's still a lot of catching up, people have to do regarding the work I've already put out, from my perspective, right? Again, because that's what it's always about. It's not always about me, but all I can really do is like operate from what it's like from here when I'm trying to share. Although I try to do a pretty good job at empathy too, like before we take any action in any way. But I recommend everybody give that a shot. It's the golden rule, sort of, in action. But let's stay on point here. So I feel that while my work is still progressing every day, when it comes to what I'm putting out, I should probably be looking to ways to better put out what I already have. But aside from that, I'm continuing to research the various angles, that are adjacent or counter adjacent to Jason's research, right? And one of those is tall human beings. And we can kind of take maybe 5 minutes to sort of, I can't decide, guys. Should I, what's up, Sarah? We got described. Yeah, stuck in the editor. Well, you're in the editor for good reason. I won't, NDA, I know, so I won't say anything. But yeah, you're in there for good reason. Congratulations. I hope all goes well. Meantime, here today, we're just going to talk some giants. I'm probably going to get over here to Graham Hancock's webpage for those of you that want to turn off now. Joking. And look at Jem Vieira's article on giants, or large human beings, however you want to say it, or humanoids. Because this past week over at Dave's Multiverse, I was invited to be on a panel with Sarah Braley, who is now a proud member of the IFNP, Institute for Natural Philosophy. And so I was proud to sort of sit in and watch her and her panel for the upcoming Set in Stone Megalithic Conference coming up first week of August. On her panel is Jem Vieira. Now, I had recognized the name, I didn't quite know from where, right? But I did. And then when I sat and listened to him, I knew I recognized the accent and the haircut from somewhere. But I didn't put two and two together. I'd seen a blurb that Graham Hancock, and this has happened many, I think 3 times, Jim said, put out his latest article. Well, I hadn't yet put together that was on giants, right? So I'm there mid-conversation sort of learning, oh, okay, this is cool. This guy seems like a genuine researcher, He, what's the word, wears his blue collar sort of well and up front, and seems very genuine was sort of my take. So I was like, okay, so I need to sort of, run off into that. And I even mentioned to him, I think it was after the recording, though you can tell me, I know you checked it out. But I mentioned to him that, my research was adjacent to this story. And I sort of was curious, about it. So I would be looking into his work. So here we go, part of the research here. You'll get to see. And we're going to look at some of this article together and just see some of the things he had to say. See what that does. There was another, who was Dan Richards, also put out a video that I've yet to take a look at on giants. And while I have already looked at this article, I'm sure we won't have time, so I said this will be a continuum. We'll perhaps even look at that video and just see what thoughts, generate. I think also it's pretty prudent that at some point we look at some Spanish chroniclers' description of Tuscaloosa and his son, of course, because that's sort of obviously the side of the story. That's habit. See, I'm not even playing anything yet. The side of the story that I'm interested in, or that I have bumped up against. I've always been interested in this human wide sort of myth and story and fascination with giants, But it wasn't until it was well after finding Mobilla, But once I dug into the research, and you start finding all these firsthand accounts of indeed a very large human being. We'd use the term giant, but I don't. It's a large human being, 8 foot, well proportioned, everything right, just bigger, right? And a sun to match, right? Now we'll go into some of my thought here before we start looking into others' works. I got something in my eye, man. Probably some of this fuzzy hair. Okay, so in the DeSoto Chronicles, we have all of these first-hand accounts. Now, for this thought experiment, right? Obviously, we're going to go ahead and lean into those first-hand accounts. We're gonna accept them, right? For this thought experiment. And I just realized, guys, I'm sorry, I didn't light a fire behind me. Oh. So we're going to go ahead and why wouldn't we, take these first-hand accounts? They sort of echo, through all of the accounts, to my knowledge. And the particular author that Ricardo and I have been, the particular chronicler that Ricardo and I have been reading from, he even goes to great length to document all of the others who gave this account, right? All of the other chroniclers. So we don't have to go into that in detail. It's important to be said and taken on board by the audience, right? That these are very well sort of verified, in which case nearly all of them are taken literally by most mainstream archaeologists, at least those involved in the hunt. I mean, just look at the way they've tried to base their maps, on the description of these people who weren't really here to map, so that was kind of a bogus effort from the get-go, but I digress. Giants. So you have all of these accounts. Should I perhaps read just a bit of their description? I don't think I have to because my time's short here today. I keep forgetting. So let's move this forward. Giants, right? Okay, with Tuscaloosa. So if I take their description of half of Vara, right, taller than the tallest, I'm somewhere in this 8-foot range. You could say 7.5, you could say 8.5, right? But we'll call it 8, okay? Someone that would stand out today, especially if all parts of body were proportionately enlarged, right? Which is what is described in detail in the DeSoto Chronicles. The interesting thing one could, if one were wanting to read into this right further, is you're going to see the account of his son being of the same manner. Perhaps a little shorter, right? Perhaps roughly the same as how he's described. Now, at that point, if I am trying to take on board these first-hand accounts as being accurate representations of what was seen, okay, I'm going to say, well, whatever was going on with this chief was going on with his son. I just trimmed my beard and I didn't get a nose hair. That's just so unprofessional, isn't it? But at least you can see it's not like cocaine I'm after or something. It's you see all this, yeah, it's bad. It's itchy. So let's examine. We have an inordinately tall individual. His son mimics. We're told everyone in this general area, again, the area in which I sit, right? I'm in between what we could call in those chronicles Atahatchee and the site of Mobilla, right? That the people of this area were, they remarked about the women, and how taller they were, not as tall as the chief by any means. He and his son were definitely the standouts. But everyone was a bit taller, and everyone was beautiful, handsome was the word they were using. you know, well proportioned. So you get a sense that they're very pretty people, you know. All of them, at least is the way they're described here. So I get the sense already that if it's passed from father to son, you know, just this brief account, that we're looking at something for which I could use the word genetic, right? DNA. Okay. That's otherwise, how is it here? Right? Because again, at this point, we haven't launched into the, you know, there's native tales about 10 feet tall, you know, and as Jim's article points out, you know, polydactyl, or like extra fingers and toes, you know, all of these things. That's not what we see in this account of Tuscaloosa, right? We see the exact opposite, right? We see just perfection, really, is what all of these guys kind of describe, because they were wanting to drive home the point, it seems to me, that this was not like what y'all know as gigantism, some slightly malformed long thing, you know, kind of like me, you know, just all gangly and shit. No, this was, you know, well put together. So I'm looking at something slightly different going on genetically, not just with the father and the son, as mentioned here, but also the people in general, right? They remark about how women were taken from here, these people, for wives, like permanently. They go show them off, you know, like, you ever see anything like this, you know? So there's lots of reasons for me to go, all right, so the genetics, there's something going on. What is that? Right? What is that then? Now, you hone in on the fact that everything I've been finding and discovering in relation to, yes, the Battle of Mobila, right? Not just the route of Hernando de Soto, but the things that existed physically here. I mean, goodness gracious, the guy we're talking about, De Soto's, Tuscaloosa's son, you know, is in a mound that is a map, that is an exact model of an impact crater, you know, about 10 miles away, right? And just magic was alive, you know, here in so many ways. But the other things, right, that I then began, and unfortunately, I know for many of the fans of my work on Mobila, but I start finding these definitive to this guy, right, evidence of this pre-flood, pre-catastrophe civilization, right? And that's as simply as I can say it. I don't really subscribe to a lot of people's theories. I just know what I found, and I know the only way it makes sense, right, is if it fits into this sort of younger Dryas destruction of North America timeline, right? And you guys know all the things I'm talking about, but most specifically, you know, I think is that triangular mound on the Cahaba River of this rubble piled up, you know, with a piece sticking out with a little half a drill hole in it pointing to the obviously not natural X in stone, right? Now that's at what would have been like sort of the northern end of, you know, Tuscaloosa's territory, right? Roughly, you know. Um, so then, of course, the intaglio, what I call the winged serpent intaglio, you know, see what you want to see, but it's there, right? And when I read all these things, and that's sort of the southern and the northern boundary of roughly, you know, what would have been Tuscaloosa's territory, right? So this mound in particular, the reason I bring it up in this conversation is, to me, to this independent researcher, right? I only see what I've stood upon as being possible, as though people who knew what was there and what had been destroyed had come behind. People who still had capabilities to move giant pieces of stone, though they were blown apart now, right? And pile them up, you know, into a giant mound. Okay? That to me sounds like somebody came back. I've put out in my research, you know, my thesis on all this and the statement that was being made, with this move, you know. But that loops you into now how I have in this exact geographic region this very something going on genetically, at least as described by the first hand accounts, right? And now the physical evidence on the ground, whatever you want to think of it, right? But for this researcher, sort of right here on the borderlands of these people's territory. Now, I can't help but see in the evidence that I know of, that I found, and then this further research, correlations, right? Now, if we then play this thought experiment out a little further, and we go, okay, I got these correlations, and I got this pretty weird-ass extra tall 2 DNA muggled in here. These people that came back here, wonder what they looked like. Wonder if they were taller. Do we have any cultural references? And I know I've scanned Jim's article. I know he gets into all these as well, too, that would mention to us there being taller individuals before a destruction. Turns out, you know, Enoch, he mentions them, right? So for those of the biblical tradition, okay, but if you want to go older, you know, if you like Mesopotamia, okay, well, you got Gilgamesh, who, Thoth, you told me, what was he, apparently like 11 to 12, you know, is the translation on his height. Yeah. Appreciate it, dude. So I'm sure you're busy. Don't worry about answering. You know, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what you told me. I just wanted to pull you in there if you're listening, because I appreciate it. All right, so we've got these myths, as they're labeled. We could just say these old stories that tell of a DNA that was prevalent upon the earth before a catastrophe, right? Okay. So now if I go ahead and take those on board, again, with this thought experiment, right? And I link them with everything else I've backed up with my own research here on the ground, right? But then these first-hand accounts and these words about what was going on right here. What I think you can see without much of a leap, really at all, if we're taken on board for our discussion, you know, all of these stories from around the world of a destruction of a former age, which was occupied at large, not only, but at large by these much larger hominids, like us, just bigger. In many of these accounts, and we don't have to take this part on board, right? But in many of these accounts, this destruction came sort of because of, if not the individual, but the actions of some of these taller hominids, these bigger ones, right? These giants, these men of old, men of renown, right? You can call them what you will, you know, just depends on the tradition, but they all hint at a DNA, right? Something that would work like us, you know, that indeed could even mate with us. So, I mean, they couldn't have been like 50 feet tall, you know, right? So, again, just to drive home the point, DNA, and even it would seem DNA that can work with our DNA, right? Taking that on board, let's get to fast forward sort of through and back to Cahaba, the cataclysmic destruction, right? Which according to, again, Enoch and many other traditions was brought about to not only wipe out sort of the civilization and its achievements, right? But quite literally this larger variant DNA, even especially in Enoch, is sort of triggered as, you know, your sons too. Everybody's gone. That's kind of the point. It's what he's saying, It's Enoch. My little translation. Enoch just running back and forth. But God, but they said, Enoch, tell them they're fucked, okay? Just, that's it. Just go tell, and, hang on, tell them their sons are fucked too, okay? All right, fine, going back. Hey, guys, listen, he said, it's Enoch. Then, if these people came back here, and they mingled, right, with the society that was already here, the people that were already here, then this DNA would change the local population, specifically if it stayed sort of localized, right? Not saying that it did, right? But we're honing in on why in the Chronicles there is this genetic anomaly, that seems to be happening here. And you match that with sort of the end result of my research. Again, lots and lots of evidence behind the things I'm saying for guys that are new. But that's not what our hour here today is about. It's about following this thread, of what does this mean? This very real question, sort of who was Chief Tuscaloosa, who was his son, this very real work I'm engaged in of bringing this story, this man's story to bear. These are questions that seem obvious, But again, just a thought experiment, right? So it would seem to me, now that's kind of the basis of sort of of the interests I want to lay out, right? But if you do want to, follow that out a little more, right? Then you could say that what we call Native American, right, is something very, very old, right? One could even say it's like again, if you're taking on board these narratives that come to us, all the oldest story in the world, fucking Gilgamesh, if you're taking on board these narratives and these two different DNA, strands, sort of the humans, and then these bigger things, right? Whatever word the texts all over the world use. Okay. Well, what you would have then here, it would seem to me, would be an amalgamation. One could use the word reconciliation of DNA, bloodlines. That's where my thought process sort of goes, when I'm just pondering. Again, accepting, taking on board as truth, what does it mean? And I got us to our 30-minute mark. What do you got here, man? Oh, 16 to 8 feet tall on Gilgamesh. Thank you, dude. Loch in Irish mythology is said to have slain a giant named Balar of the Evil Eye with a sling and a stone, so much like David, right, from the Bible. It's these themes, right? It's these themes. They're everywhere. That people want to say is, it's just a mythological expression of a part of a human being that either wants a monster or wants to be bigger. And you're like, well, that is fine. But what about all the bones in the newspaper reports? What about, what about all of these first-hand accounts that historians say take seriously, except the part about the giant, You're like, well, that just doesn't work, Hoss, right? So, yeah, what is this? Is all we're wanting to do here. Now, I mentioned at the outset, before I get to my time limit here, guys, that we were going to look at an article by Jim Vieira. I hope I'm saying it right, because I told him when I was on that show that I would. And so we're going to do just a little bit of that here. And what I'm going to do is I'll share with you guys so you can see where to find it, because I don't think we will by any means get through all of it. But let's see if I get, and I'm going to do all this myself, but I got it. There's that. Okay, now let's come back and let's, yeah, okay, so that's cool, but I need to go back and plus this up. So we're like, I can actually read it and you can read it. There, how's that? Okay, so we've got Footprints of the Gods, Extra Digits, The Mark of the Giants. Again, this is a book by Jem Vieira and Greg Maestro. I, again, was fortunate enough and blessed to sit down and mostly just listen to a panel with Jim on it this past weekend. And he seems like, an excellent dude, somebody whose work you're willing to at least take on board. And as I say to everybody, I don't ask anyone else to approve of my methodology of which information, of selecting which information I'll take on board. But I want to go to the source first, and I hadn't taken on a lot of Jim's work, but I had the opportunity to sit there with him and go, okay, this is a good dude. I'll go check out his work. And that's generally how I operate, which may explain the weird sort of diaspora of sources and friends you might find I have. Okay, so here's the welcome. Let's get right to the article. I also didn't know, I learned in the interview that he... So one of his early books he had written with Hugh Newman, and when I was in Arizona earlier this year, what year are we in? I was fortunate enough again to listen to a lecture there by Hugh Newman, and I had my notebook, and I'm sitting down with Jim, and I'm flipping through, and I'm like, yeah, back at Hugh Newman, Megalith, this will work. And he sits and he starts to introduce himself, and he says, indeed, I co-authored with Hugh Newman. I was like, all right, that's weird. So that's another one of the reasons we will be reading this article and looking into his work. For those of you that have followed the show long enough, you understand the different ways in which we navigate. You leaving? I'm going to Sonic. Going to Sonic. Yep. Love you. All right. Be safe. So that's my oldest, and she tells me last night some of her friends follow me, so that's always. I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. All right. Okay. You can stop yelling anytime. Thanks. All right, so let's kick in right with the beginning of this article, and I'm going to dedicate sort of the last half hour we have to looking at this, another independent researcher's work. And again, this will be a multifaceted part deal, I guess is the way to say that, which again is something I'm trying to do, to figure out, what to do with the work, since there is indeed so much behind that needs to be caught up on. Not by me, I mean by y'all. So in the meantime, we're going to figure out how to get that out better, but also just keep expounding here on all the satellite work. Quote, the Indian explanation is always cast aside as a superstition, precluding Indians from having an acceptable status as human beings and reducing them in the eyes of educated people to a pre-human level of ignorance. The possessor of the oral traditions had nothing that would encourage him or her to change the meaning or emphasis of the information. People had no vested interest in wealth or prestige by becoming knowledgeable. That's Vine, I hope I'm saying that right, Deloria Jr., 1933 to 2005, author, theologian, historian, and Lakota Sioux leader. The above quotes from the legendary Vine Deloria Jr. highlight how easy it is to forget our past and how oral tradition is often marginalized in modern academic circles. To me, throwing out thousands of years of evidence by peoples closer to the events being studied is just bad science. In the late 1990s, Deloria organized a conference of Native American elders in Washington state where they shared their tribe's traditions of giants. Virtually every indigenous group that you can name in North America has legends of giants and cataclysmic destruction, a pattern that continues to every corner of the globe. So already we see here between Mr. Vieira's article and what we were already discussing, correlations for sure. We'll continue for a couple of paragraphs, and then we're going to, I think, just skim through and look at a couple of the uh, mm, mm, ex no the, what's the word, examples, there we go, examples that he gives of this phenomena. And then, of course, we'll direct you here, as you can see, to the featured author of the month on Graham Hancock's website, and you can dig further into his work on your own. So here we were with yep. Footprints of the Gods, extra digits. Mark, let's do this too. Footprints of the Gods, extra digits, the mark of giants, is the culmination of years of investigation, global exploration, interviews, audiences with shamans, wisdom keepers, museum curators, and archaeologists. Its larger purpose is to highlight that there are many ancient mysteries worthy of investigation. It is highly reliant on academic expertise, but equally indebted to ancient texts and ancestral wisdom. An approach that can be a blueprint to unravel other enigmas. I wholeheartedly agree with that. This is mainly an investigation into is this going to be polydactyl, right? Or polydactyl? Polydactyl. That's the $10 word for extra fingers and toes. And this bizarre trait, oddly specific and biologically rare, turns up again and again in sacred temples, rock art, carvings, high-status tombs, and statues of gods and founders. Sometimes it's on ancestral beings, sometimes on protector spirits, often on creator gods and giants. Always on someone or something set apart from the rest of humanity. So what are we looking at here? A world before our world? A story older than myth? Yeah, I would say we're much on the same understanding here of what's on offer for us for this mystery of giants. You know, part of what I said to this article's author after we stopped recording was that I, of course, had some platforms, but before I reached out, regarding talking, I wanted to dive into this work to see if we would indeed have a conversation on our hands that overlapped sort of with what I was working on, and what he was working on. And I would say that so far we definitely do. So let's get to his description of how he got pulled into what, guys, we all know, anybody, Heather Arnold, anybody I've talked to that in any way focuses or has work that's heavy involved with these large human beings, they understand that there's this knee-jerk reaction, right? And it's so strange. And it's probably largely the fault of like modern sort of culture, thinking like Disney cartoons and the Lilliputians, all these cultural references we have that sort of make fun of, or they make sort of outlandishly large this thing called giant, right? So by the time you get to what could be these sort of very realistic, and achievable descriptions, you get sort of laughed at. That's why I'm glad we most likely have a skeleton over here at Mobilla buried, yeah, again, my interest. So how Mr. Vieira got pulled into this topic. About 15 years ago, I stumbled across a little-known paper by British museum archaeologist Dr. Richard Barnett. It was called Six Fingers in Art and Archaeology, a scholarly piece that most folks never heard of, tucked away in the bulletin of the Anglo-Israel Archaeological Society. Barnett noticed something no one else seemed to be talking about: ancient depictions of people, gods, and giants with 6 digits weren't isolated accidents. They were everywhere. That moment changed everything for me. I had already been researching giants, flood myths, and the strange stories the Smithsonian seemed eager to misplace. But this was different. This was a pattern so clear it was hiding in plain sight. Yeah, I totally agree with him here as well, that we all are familiar with these Smithsonian, as everybody would call them, tales of giant bones that are missing here in Alabama alone, up around Florence, somewhere. I don't think it was particularly Florence, but in that area, the Shoals, there was a case of giant, some people said they're like stone sarcophagi that were found, and they go off to the Smithsonian and, where are they? They're lost. And that happens sort of across the board with these stories of these extra large bones that we have trickled down through us through newspapers and archaeological reports and other well validated sources. Yeah, this is good stuff here. Really good. All right, let's see. I need to check our time, guys. I'm sorry because I have some driving to do, and we'll look back at the chat. We're at 40 minutes here, so let's finish how he got on this topic, and maybe that will encourage everybody to go check out his article, and we'll then pick up next episode. Most likely, I think Ricardo, now that he's back on this side of the world, is eager to get back to a little reading, so we will be doing that probably tomorrow. The next day. So let's go another couple of paragraphs with how Mr. Vieira got on this topic. Okay, so Barnett was the keeper of Western Asiatic antiquities at the British Museum for nearly 2 decades, the founder of Anglo-Israel Archaeological Society, and a commander of the British Empire. This was not a fringe theorist, but a highly regarded academic. Barnett's scholarly output was phenomenal, as he was noted for making an immense contribution to studies of the ancient Near East. He also had remarkable linguistic talents and was put to work as a code breaker at Bletchley Park from 1940 until 42. He worked with the classicist D.R. Shackleton Bailey and succeeded in breaking the codes used by Turkish diplomats in the Axis capitals. This is very noteworthy because the understanding of the global polydactyl mystery is indeed an exercise in breaking an ancient code. Barnett was brilliant, phenomenally talented, and dared to say the obvious plainly. The phenomena of 6 fingers and toes, polydactylism, in ancient art and archaeology is one that has received no attention from scholars. He wasn't being poetic. He was calling out a blind spot the size of a Mesopotamian ziggurat. Barnett's observations and the silence surrounding them sparked something in me. If polydactyl was symbolically tied to divinity, kingship, or monstrosity across cultures, why wasn't anyone mapping the pattern? That's a fine question, author. So I decided to. I started traveling, researching, interviewing scholars, indigenous keepers of memory. Around the same time, I began collaborating more closely with Greg. We're going to go with Maestro, whose fascination with humanity's hidden origins naturally aligned with my own. Introduced through our longtime friend, Hugh Newman, the megalithic maniac explorer and author we've both had the privilege of working with for over a decade, our partnership grew from shared curiosity into a creative and research-driven alliance. This is excellent backstory. And I'm going to probably wrap with it right there. And just to say, I hope, and we're going to look at the rest of this article, that this draws everybody to it. And we're going to pick this back up because I kind of wanted to do my due diligence, do what I said I would do, and dive into it and see if there was meat on the bone. And indeed, it seems there's quite a lot. So we can check that off the box. And then we're just going to finish scrolling through the article in hopes of showing everyone all of the examples, the beautiful photos that can be seen by going to Graham Hancock's webpage and checking out his author of the month for July section. Look at that. On the roof. Again, you got the gist of what he's going to be diving into here is going into why does the phenomenon of the polydactylism, sort of travel with the stories and the artistic representations of these extra large human beings. Yeah, I'm excited. This is really great stuff, really deep too. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to finish promoting it by showing you down here about the authors. We've got Jim Vieira, author, and Greg Maestro. Go check these guys out as we zoom to the top of the page right here, Graham Hancock's homepage, July Authors of the Month. And we're going to continue to dive into this. I am very much interested, and that's kind of what I was hoping to establish here today, was what there was here to pick on, and there's quite a bit. Also, one of the other things that I haven't had time to look at that we were possibly going to look at. Hey, what's up, Tammy? Yeah, that's why we're talking about it, Tammy. She said Jim will be. Tammy is helping, of course, in so many ways with Sarah Braley and the Set in Stone Megalithic Conference. I pitched it here at the beginning, Tammy, and I gave the backstory on how I wound up sitting on that panel with Jim. And I didn't realize, that he had work on giants, right? And of course, with my own interest, I was like, I'll go check out your work. That's what I told him anyway. So we were doing that. But yeah, he's going to be a speaker at the conference. That was kind of the whole tie-in. So thank you, Tammy, for showing up. And yeah, the 2 rows of teeth I have heard as well. 2 rows of teeth, polydactyl, sometimes red hair. And I think at least what we'd be sort of getting to there is perhaps the condition of this genetic material. Let me stop sharing there for a second. Before diluvian, right? Before destruction, obviously, I would think, And I know there's so much more that ties into this, right? If you go, which I haven't checked out, and we were possibly going to watch here, but we're about at time. Dan Richards, another community, sort of at-large researcher, I saw just, and I put it on my save list, did a video on. It looks like not only the phenomenon of giants and bones, but sort of his research been here lately has been diving into the elongated skulls, and so that also, is another thread that again unless you're looking at the doctored skulls, right? What are you talking? You're talking somehow DNA, somehow genetically, right? And again, is that the same? Were they tall? All excellent questions. But I try to boil it all down to how does it affect sort of what I'm looking for, which is Chief Tuscaloosa and this sort of genetically different, as outlined by the first-hand accounts of the explorers, population that also occupies this area of, it seems to me, antediluvian destruction. Yeah, guys. So I see the chat popping up. What's up, Screwdriver? Everybody's popping up here at the end. So, yeah. I've got to hit the road to Lower Alabama. That's what we call L.A. Around here. Lower Alabama. To get somebody home. But I wanted to begin, for anybody that's interested in sort of going back and checking out the the rest of the beginning of this hour, what it is in part just a beginning of exploring this giant sort of question, this large human question, because it is a pretty important thread to the story I'm involved in telling, the story of Tuscaloosa and his son. And then with my antediluvian stuff, what is the connection? Why are they both here in the same place on the globe? Next to an 85 million year old star wound that at its center, modern science has found things that don't come from Earth, right? Why is all this in the same place, y'all? Is sort of where I'm trying to get, right? Is why is all this in the same place, man? It's, there are no coincidences, and certainly not spanned across the history and development of the globe and of human and taller things, evolution or civilization, whatever you want to call it. Screwdriver, thanks for jumping in. You heard it all. Okay, great. Excellent. Yeah, I'm really interested to get further into Jim's work. Again, just not when you're, look, I've been so hard on my research, right? It's been all real world that now sort of the benefit, I guess one could say, the if I get anything, personally out of this whole podcasting thing, right? Trying to relate to you guys, this way, is that I do get invited and get to meet so many different independent researchers, right? And ones I'm not familiar with, right? And get these brilliant moments of being able to sit down with somebody, and before you even know about their work or what they do, you can just sort of hang out and watch them and, get a vibe for, oh, that's what kind of person that is, right? And then to find out, okay, great, their work also sort of harps on one of these questions I'm picking on, is wonderful sort of bonus, or really it serves to be, just about motivation for doing this whole thing, is to further the research in general. Which is what I try to do, and which is what that IFNP tries to do, the Institute for Natural Philosophy. Come find us on our Discord. Most of you guys are already in there that are in the chat. That's how you find out about what we're doing, but it's also where you and where we carry on with all of this talk that we do here. And like I said, much thanks to Scribed. He's Thoth, the Atlantean on X, Scribed Jehudi, a.k.a. Matt. Sort of helped coalesce. One of the first messages I got, when I was checking my messages this morning was from him talking about the conversation. And I had already had in my head, okay, we need to jibe into this Jim Vieira, and we need to start sort of publicly, talking about what is this question mark. And you very much just sort of inspired that. And I had to do one episode to get rolling this week because we're 3 behind. I'm going to do 3 a week, and it's Wednesday. So giants it was. Thank you very much, my friend, for all the contributions. I mean that to every single one of you. Thank you for everything you do. Episode 32. Looks like it's going to be a short one. 33 next. What are we going to do for that? I think what we may try to do, and this is a may, right? Because I try to do what I say I'm going to do. So we're going to say may try to do is sort of do a recap, a very, what we can do, recap of what I've discovered, right? The things that make up these mysteries, which I try to describe to you each week here. So that might be a good use of that numbered episode. But we'll also see. Hopefully tomorrow, though, we'll be back reading, I think, Stardust is what we'll do next on The Shaman and the Philosopher with my partner Ricardo over there on the Institute for Natural Philosophy's YouTube page. That's, I think, it. Thank you, everybody that popped in. It's good to see you guys this week. I hope everybody's well. Let me know through whatever method. It doesn't have to be the chat here, through Discord, through messengers, if something stands out to you in any of the conversations we have here or that I have on any of the other programs I'm blessed to sit in on. And we can sort of, do what we just did here today, start a little deeper dive into what it means, and particularly things that sort of correlate to my work. Look, I just noticed, I forgot, well, it's because it was light. I forgot to turn on the background lights. See, these were a Father's Day gift, so, they have to be appropriately used. Now, whichever one of my daughter's friends it is that watches these, you can go tell her that, see, that's why I turned it on. See, I don't know what to do with that information. I really don't. No, I'm kidding. Thanks for the support, Aiden. Thank you, everybody in the chat. We're going to give this a clean wrap up, I think, here at an hour because I'll be back tomorrow reading with you, and then we'll be back here either tomorrow night or the next day, sort of continuing with this giant discussion because I would like to look further at Jim's article and potentially some of the other stuff we've talked about. And let's read some of these firsthand accounts of Tuscaloosa together. So that's what we're definitely going to do in our next episode here, whether or not I try to do the sort of recap. Maybe it's a combination of the two. I don't know. It's really good to hang out with you guys. It's been like 10 days, I think, something like that, since I've been here. So sorry for the away, but I had 4 days away with the daughters, it's the family, and a little bit of time here to sort of take on board what the appropriate next step with all of this energy direction of mine, which you could call producing material, which is the adequate, or best direction for me to aim that energy, right? So we're starting easy with some overlapping topics, giants, and a couple more to come. And we'll see you guys tomorrow, okay? Thanks. Good night. I don't know why I'm whispering, but I'm rolling with it. Remember, our best future requires the truth of our past. I knew we'd get to use the Vincent Price light. I knew it.